Good to see you, Vibhuti. Andreas, how are you? Shirley, great to see you. I will say what I always say when we start these. We've got a good sign up for today. I think we've got 65 people signed up. We will probably get half of that come through. This will be available on demand. I'm recording it as we speak. Because of the nature of these briefings being very much contemporaneous, you know, things are changing. Anna and I were just having that conversation. Things are changing on a 12-hour basis. So I'll try and get the recording of this out tomorrow before it gets old. But for those of you who are live in the session, please feel free at any time to pop a note in the chat box, and you know, any comments that you have or questions, or if you'd like to ask something of any of our brilliant panelists, just go right ahead, put it in the chat box. I'll keep an eye on it. As I say, it is being recorded, so I'll try and get that out to everybody tomorrow. So if you are watching this on demand on YouTube, please subscribe to the Euro channel and please press like. Everybody says that on YouTube, but it really does matter because it makes our channel go higher and we get more recognition for relocation. So I am delighted today to be hosting this briefing focusing on the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Australia, and India. And I have got 4 of the shiniest stars of our fantastic Euro membership with me. And I'm really, really pleased to have you all here. Anna, Dima, Sebastian, and Raman, thank you so much for taking part today. What we'll do, if it's okay, first is just check in on where we are right now with the pandemic and what's happening where you are. So Anna, where are you and what's going on?
Thank you very much, Dom. It's lovely to see you again virtually. Maybe one day we'll be in person, and to see everybody else virtually as well. So I'm based in Melbourne in Australia. And where are we up to? So for some people who may not be aware, Australia took a very hard line, essentially an elimination strategy very early on in the piece by shutting its border last March. And it remains shut, and maybe out of our location, a little bit of luck, we've managed to keep COVID very, very well under control. We've had less than 1,000 deaths in total. We also have states which have hard borders, which state premiers can implement hard borders, which also helps to contain the virus. So that has been very good from, I guess, a quality of life and lifestyle for most Australians, but there have been localized lockdowns. Melbourne went through a very long one last year, and actually Sydney is in the midst of a 3-week lockdown. We'll see where that goes. They are tracking at about 30 cases a day. This is of the Delta variant. So it was handled amazingly well, but because of that, and because of a very slow rollout of the vaccine, hesitancy, etc., etc., we find our population is not sufficiently vaccinated, hence the lockdowns. So we're in somewhat of a gilded cage. We live very freely and we have a good lifestyle, but the border is still most definitely shut. It's very difficult to get people in. The government has just halved the number of passengers coming in every week to 3,000. 90% of them will be Australian nationals. That leaves only 10% for foreigners. That's only 300 a week. It's going to be really hard to get people in. So, but if you're an Australian, I guess you don't have too much to complain about. And then we have lots of other countries in the region that maybe I'll come back to how they're faring.
That would be great. You mentioned hesitancy. Is there? I did not know that in Australia. Is not just the slow rollout of the program, but people are hesitant?
Very much so. And we've had this complacency because COVID has really not affected the vast amount of the population. Most people don't know anyone that's had COVID. So there's a lot of hesitancy, complacency. Maybe I won't, maybe I'll leave it. And unfortunately, the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is the only one that's produced in country, has been rather dogged by bad press, which has not helped. They are now trying to get the Pfizer vaccine, but we're not very high up on the queue for that. And it has to be flown in. We are, I think, unfortunately, we have the not great medal of being last of all the OECD countries in the vaccine rollout at the moment. But anyway, everybody is at least getting much more behind it. There's more PR happening and things like that. So hopefully we're tracking in a better direction now. Yeah.
Good. I mean, that's good to hear. It is so interesting though, because like you say, whenever we've spoken in the past, you know, life in Australia has looked very much as normal, except for the travel piece. So what was behind the variant coming in? Because you still have mandatory hotel quarantine, right?
We do, yeah. Yeah. So mandatory 14-day quarantine on arrival. And the states love to blame each other about how it happened and where did it come from. And but I think it's just a lapse in hotel quarantine security again. It's basically what's happened every time, and then it just gets out. And it just seems so incredibly unlucky about how it gets out and then how it spreads. And somebody flew all around the country, and just it always seems to be the way. Murphy's Law, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll get on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll come back. We'll talk again in a minute about other regions. Dima, if I can come to you next. Always great to see you. Where are you? And you're going to talk about what's going on with COVID right now.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Dom, and great to be here again. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk mainly about China today, and it's very interesting because it's a very similar strategy than there was in Australia. But with the very difference of a very high vaccination rollout at the same time. So for China has been pursuing pretty much straight from the beginning, once the initial outbreak in Wuhan was kept within the city, tried to go with the zero COVID strategy and try to eliminate local transmissions and new incoming cases. And I did that similar to the other APAC countries that are following the same model. So Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Greater China, they're all working on the same model of restricted arrivals, mandatory quarantine, very excessive testing, and then contact tracing. And by and large, China actually has done a very, very good job on that. And sort of after the first 3 or 4 months of the initial outbreak, has actually been able to keep cases down to an absolute minimum. Again, there were always occasional outbreaks in various cities, but then have gone after that very aggressively with public testings. I remember there was one situation back in Qingdao in, I think it was July, August last summer, where they had a suspected outbreak and they managed to test 10 million people within the course of a week. I mean, it was like in terms of these numbers games on China when it comes to COVID, it is pretty mind-blowing. At present, we have the situation still that there is restricted arrival and mandatory quarantines. So who's allowed in are work and resident permit holder, and applications can still be processed. So we can take incoming transferees, which is great. The application process takes a little bit longer, and there's a couple of restrictions around that, but by and large, we can process these applications. Business travelers are allowed with special exemptions, so-called PU letter. So that brings us some short-term assignments as well. The only thing that is really not possible are sort of free tourist travels and business travels without a very specific reasons. Then obviously upon arrival, you are facing a 3 weeks quarantine process. Apologies, a 3 weeks quarantine process, a 2 to 3 weeks that is, and that is a government organized one. So meaning you can't pre-book. Upon arrival, you will be allocated a accommodation. You can specify sort of the budget range where you would like to stay, but that's about it. The actual hotel or service apartment itself will be assigned to you within that budget range that you are given. And we had mixed results with that. We had some transferees that came through that and said it was actually an okay experience, and other ones were had a very hard time. But again, quarantine in APAC is sort of seems more or less like a standard process, something you just have to go through when you go to a new country, and it never appears to be particularly fun. We have yet to meet the transferee that walks out of 2 weeks of self-isolation and goes that, yeah, I really enjoyed that. So that is the current requirement. We have a couple of countries on the high risk list, and unfortunately now the UK is among that, which is yeah, not particularly easy. But once you're through the quarantine, day-to-day life is fairly normal. It's returned to what we call a new normal in China. So domestic relocation, for example, is doing very well. because there are very little restrictions within China. Obviously, again, there are some exemptions to some destinations occasionally, but masks are needed only in public transport or very crowded areas. You have very limited restrictions to going out and public dining. So in terms of spacing, there's very little what you have to take into consideration. And that also means that we are actually able to provide our services close to normal. Like we're able to deliver to the service scope that's given to us. And it's been like this pretty much since last August, last September. On a vaccination front, yeah, we have actually something in the exact opposite to Australia when it comes to the actual dosage. And I mean, we were joking earlier, China is currently vaccinating about 20 million people, or administrating 20 million doses per day, which means they could vaccinate Australia in one go during one day, but I don't think that will be outsourced at any time. But we're accounting for almost 50% of the administered doses on an average day, on the global number. So China is very aggressive on that front. They've handed out 950 million doses per day and are aiming to have 40% of the population completely vaccinated. So that's roughly 500 million completely vaccinated by the end of July. And I mean, we had not all of that, I think, comes naturally by just general motivation by the public. There's been a lot of pressure from the government and a lot of promotion and marketing from the government in order to get everybody vaccinated. But it's been very successful on that front. So we assume that by sort of later on in the year, we will have some sort of herd immunity here, which then hopefully will have some sort of impact on opening up the borders even more.
It's fascinating just to, all the way through this, being able to talk with you all about, what's been going on and, the exchange of information that's been happening through the Euro membership, just how incredibly diverse the governmental systems have been in response to this crisis in terms of we talked to Australia, talked to you in Australia, and I talked to, members in the US, and the cultural implication is freedom first. Whereas obviously for China, a much more collectivist society, and so therefore what's good for the greater whole. And
yeah, no, it's just to add to that. I mean, it's been very obvious. I mean, there's been sort of a very big understanding of getting vaccinated is a civil duty. Right. So that is something that it has to be done for the greater good. At the same time, obviously, if the government tells you to get vaccinated, you get vaccinated here. I mean, that's these two factors that come together. So that has been, we have been one of the very few countries that has the zero COVID strategy and that has been very successful in the vaccination drive at the same time. If you take Australia and New Zealand, for example, very successful with the strategy, but then vaccination drive, as Anna just said, is relatively low.
It's very interesting how that's come about as well, because here in the UK, I know one of the reasons why hesitancy was within the younger age group, of course, the least risk part of the population. But if they want to travel, there is an implication. And so therefore now those numbers of vaccinations are really going up. Roman, can I come to you next? It's great to see you. How are you? Where are you? And what's happening?
Good to see you, Dom, and good to see all of you guys on the panel. I'm in New Delhi right now. To answer that question, I am still a survivor, in spite of the fact that my whole family, when I say my whole family, I mean my wife, my daughters, our household team, everybody was down with COVID, and I was the only survivor who stayed COVID-free. And so thank God, maybe I have some immunity in me, from somewhere, I don't know where, genetic or whatever, that I've been very close to COVID and still been COVID-free. So I think that was a good one. Yeah, and so I still remember when we spoke, I think long time back during one of the such chats. This was during the first lockdown, I think, or after the first lockdown, and I said that when in end of March 2020, yeah, it's 21, 2020, when India announced lockdown. And I said, hey, nice 1 month holiday, great, never had that. This is going to be fun, and we'll be back to work in May or June or whatever it is. And we're all sitting in 2021 July, and we've gone through even a more severe COVID wave, which was a second wave, and another lockdown. And I think it's dawned on me that it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay for a while in whatever form it is, whether it's a Delta variant now or it will be another new variant tomorrow, and so on. So India went through a lot in the last few months. I think we went through the first wave, which saw a lot of people leaving, going back home, and a lot of departure services being initiated and so on, thinking that, okay, we're going to come back and so on and so forth. The country opened up in July, and we somehow, I don't know how, I think as a country, we failed to learn very quickly to the fact, seeing a lot of European countries go through a second wave, and somehow we just thought that we'll be fine. And then the second wave came, and I think that really was more powerful. I mean, maybe 10 times more powerful than the first wave, to the extent that it impacted everybody. Unlike in Australia or in some other parts of the world where people didn't know what was COVID, or they didn't know for miles, or they didn't know anybody who had COVID. I think in the second wave, there was no household that did not know anyone who lost a loved one or a friend in the family. So, I mean, there was a week where I used to wake up, and every day I would get a message that, oh, did you know that this person is no more? And, so golfing buddies, friends, old friends, school friends, people you knew, somebody's parents, somebody he himself or herself, and you realize that, that what the hell is happening? And it actually scared all of us a lot. It really impacted us a lot. It led to a lot of families losing their loved ones, and then there's a lockdown. You can't step out. You can't have your other loved ones being with you to support you at this time. So it was a tough time, I think, for everybody during the second wave. And I think we immediately realized, like the rest of the world, that the only way forward to fight this is to get vaccinated, and to have a country little smaller than China, of 1.3 billion people being vaccinated is a task itself. But unlike the US, where they offered, which maybe China could take that, a free burger or $75 or free marijuana to get vaccinated. I guess we just had to, our country, we just had to live on active marketing and kind of more information spreading to say that, listen, this is it. You have to get vaccinated, and you need to get through this. And being a huge country, I think, talking about some numbers, we have touched 300 million people who are who have been vaccinated with at least one dose, right? And we have around 6.5 million people who've got both their doses. So we have two vaccines here. One is Covaxin, which is indigenously developed by the country. And then, like in Australia, other countries, we have the AstraZeneca version of the domestically produced vaccine, which is great. At the same time, we've had issues with WHO, with globally, with none of the EU did not recognize the AstraZeneca made in India called Covishield, for example. And now they've kind of, Switzerland and 7 other European EU countries have come back and said that, okay, we recognize that. Of course, they need, in order for their economy also to get back, they need somebody to come and travel and spend money in their country, or to work in their country and do things. So I think that's opening up. The other vaccine, which is a Covaxin, which is made in India, is still awaiting WHO approval, like maybe the Russian one, the Sputnik, and so on. But I think it will take another few months, and that will open up. So being vaccinated is number one priority for the country. As far as the overall COVID cases are concerned, I think we were at a peak of a couple of months ago. We were at a peak of 300,000 cases per day across the country. Out of which 60% cases were coming from South India, Western India, which is Maharashtra, Mumbai, and then rest of the South Indian states. I think that's really come under control. We don't have more than 45,000 cases roughly per day, which is a lot compared to what I heard about from Anna on Australia. I mean, Delhi, we have, I think, maybe 100 cases a day and so on. But as a country, it's 45,000 cases, but within 1.3 billion people, it's actually not much. So people are out again. The lockdown is over. People are supposed to wear masks in all the public places and in all the places. Even if you're in a car alone, you have to wear a mask, otherwise you are fined. So so it's everything is considered a public place, and I think which is important. And I think that is very, very important for us and our industry to bounce back. Also, that the more people are cautious, the more we make sure that everybody feels safe, and the more mobility will happen eventually, so on and so forth. The borders are opened up. We still have bubble flights. We don't have scheduled. We don't have regular flights as it used to be. So there are still bubble flights, which means that you can come into the country as long as you have a work permit visa, you have a valid reason for a business visa, or you have a student visa, and so on and so forth. So I think that traffic is going on, and we can see as of today, I can see that a lot of people are coming back. And again, people who left their lives here, who are there, who had apartments fully furnished and were living there, and had to go back. Everybody's eager to come back, and I think as all companies, whether they could be mid-sized organization, they could be giants or multinational companies. I think everybody's hungry to kind of get back to work and to get back to doing business, whether it's a home or doesn't matter, whether it's a hybrid model. But you got to keep that machinery oiled and machinery moving, and I think that's what is going to drive mobility across every country, across every state in our country, or every state in Australia or China, or Middle East or the US. So I think it's a journey we're going through, which is interesting. We're learning. I think we'll talk more on the mobility side of it as we move forward, the changing in the trends of the kind of requests coming in. But yeah, that's where we are in India as of now.
Raman, thank you so much. We all saw the TV footage, the news footage of when the second wave hit, and it was absolutely devastating. And when we first time, I think we all had optimism at the beginning of this, that by the end of last summer, we would have started to have been in recovery. And so I can imagine the kind of shock for the people of India to see that wave crash on so heavily. It must have been so traumatizing for everybody.
Yeah, we had I think 400,000 people died. Majority of which, since COVID started, majority of which happened in the second wave. In the second wave, we lost 800 doctors. Just doctors who died while, forget the rest of the frontline medical staff, but 800 doctors died. It was sad. I can tell you that, it was very depressing to wake up and to hear news that you knew that, this person, he's no more. I just met him a month ago and he's no more. How's that possible? So we saw death. We realized that it actually was forced upon to us that we're mortals and they might not be here tomorrow. So it was very, very tough for a lot of people, I must say that.
It makes me so angry that there are still people out there who claim that this is not happening. Anyway, there we go. Thank you so much, Raman. We'll come back and talk about mobility in a minute. Sebastian, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. So where are you and how are things where you are?
Thank you, Dom. Thank you for having me. It's nice to see everyone. I cannot believe we didn't see each other for such a long time. Now I keep being pushed back. So one day, eventually, I think we'll go back to normal. Look, here I am in Dubai and covering Middle East and Africa. I'm based in Dubai myself and in the UAE, so I can touch base about the UAE first. And I think it's quite interesting what we're seeing here, because UAE could be a case study. They decided to go the other way. Completely different direction of everyone else. What they've done is we went into a very hard lockdown last year, as everyone else. I think that was the first reaction of all governments. Let's see how we handle this. So let's lock down everything. Very, very hard one. We weren't able to move around. It was even for grocery shopping. So it was quite interesting. And then they decided to reopen slowly. Back in July last year, they decided to reopen the borders completely. So it means that UAE is one of the only countries in the world where you can come freely. And I have to be careful when I say that, because Dubai and Abu Dhabi are handling it very differently. Abu Dhabi doesn't need the tourism, right? So they don't care. Dubai needs the tourism, so they care. And that's why Dubai decided to open its border completely since July. Now, what's crazy is despite the borders being open to everyone, except some countries on and off when the variant is coming up. We've seen it with India, we've seen it with other countries. South Africa, for example, has been closed since last January. But despite that, we have not seen a single curfew or lockdown since April 2020. So it's been more than a year now. We live normally. The only thing we're having is mask at all times, social distancing. So restaurants will apply a bit of distance between tables, but the restaurants have been open, the bars are open, nightclubs are open, but no dancing. So that's interesting. You can, cinemas are open, the parks, the malls, everything is open. The only thing is masks, pushing for vaccination. So unlike Dima was saying in China, where it's kind of being pushed, it's been pushed as well here, I would say, but indirectly. So we are seeing measures such as, for example, it came up this morning, from 1st of August, you can only visit governmental bodies and entities if you have been double vaccinated, you have received 2 doses of vaccination, or you have a 2 days PCR test. And Abu Dhabi is doing the same now, where every public space is controlled. You can only go if you've been vaccinated, or if you have a 3-day PCR test. So if you choose not to be vaccinated, which is your choice, then you have to do a PCR test every 3 days. And what I mean by that is malls, large grocery stores, cinemas, parks, beach, everything. So pretty much, if you don't get vaccinated, if you don't have a PCR test, then you don't have a life. But going back to Dubai, so Dubai decided to open back in July, and then since then, I've been able to control the cases with just the masks, just the fact that, you know, social distancing, no large gathering. You can sit down up to 10 people at the same table in restaurants. You can entertain up to 10 to 30 people at home at once. But then you have to respect the social distancing and the mask at all times. No more than 2 people per vehicle, if not related. So that's affecting as well a bit the way we conduct the tours on the field. We cannot take more than two passengers with a consultant. And then I think the key element has been to be testing a lot. So for a population of 10 million, which is not a small country, it's not a big country, of course, compared to India and China, but it's not a small country, 10 million. And what they've decided to do is to test. So it became part of the culture to be tested a lot. Here, you want to go to Abu Dhabi, there is the border between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, you get tested. You need to go to a police station, you need to be tested. You have any contact case, any doubts, you're being tested. I can tell you for myself, I'm up to 36 PCR tests since the beginning of the crisis. And I speak to some friends in France, and they have not been tested ever. So it's very normal here. It's you pay for it. It's quite cheap. It's about 10 to 20 euros, depending on where you do it. But people are being tested all the time. In the office is open. We're working normally. We have 2 shifts just to limit the risk. If there is a case, then we don't have to shut down the office. But working from the office is back to normal and it's been back in place for a while. But as soon as we have a doubt, anyone has a sneeze or anything, we all get tested. We all make sure, and that's the way they are finding a lot of cases. So what's interesting is for 10 million people, they are testing between 250 to 300,000 a day. And among these 250 to 300,000, they still find between 1,500 to 2,000 cases, but most of them are asymptomatic. And we would have never found them without the testing. That makes the second way of controlling things here, which is working well, is isolating. But it's not isolating like, hey, please stay home. You have to stay home. If you've been a contact case of you had it, you're home for 10 days. And if you don't, you have a fine up to 8,000 euros. So you don't mess around with that. And I think it's been a key element, even though it's a bit tough, it's been a key element in keeping control while deciding to live with the COVID normally. We go out, we travel, the borders, like I said, are open, people are coming in and out. We've been able to, all of us here have been able to travel. The thing which helps a lot as well here is, let's not forget that 85% of the population is or are expats. So it makes people respect the rules a bit more. We are all guests here, and then if we're being asked to do things, people are doing them. So I think it's a bit easier to apply something like this than in Australia, like I was saying, where there's a culture of maybe not wanting to do the vaccination. The last thing which has been incredible in the country is the vaccination program. Vaccination program has started way early in December. They decided to go with the Sinopharm from China, and then we've I mean, we've seen the numbers are amazing. As of last week, the UAE is the most vaccinated country in the world in terms of percentage. We have done almost 16 million doses for 10 million people. So that's about 160% doses compared to the population. We're sitting at 68% of people having 2 doses, and then 72% having at least 1 dose. So we are seeing the effect of the herd immunity, and that the one Dima was saying, and we're all hoping for. Even though I have to say they're a bit disappointed, and is it because Sinopharm is not as efficient as they thought it would be? They have introduced as well Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Sputnik, but I think they're a bit disappointed by the numbers not going down as much as they wanted to. And is it because of the massive testing? Is it because despite the vaccine, it's still circulating? And I know many people who had it after the vaccine, but then they have no symptoms. So, or very mild symptoms. So it becomes a flu. So I think then the question is, the way they want to do it here is let's keep minimal this social distancing and barriers. Let's live normally. Let's vaccinate everyone. Let's see how numbers are going down. We had a peak last January after we had a lot of travelers, expats going back home, bringing back the variant from the UK, for example. We had a lot of UK tourists as well coming in because the borders were open. So we went from 2,000 cases a day to 4,000 cases a day. But what was interesting again is that they were able to reduce it back to 1,500 without curfew, without lockdown, without any restriction except the one I mentioned. So I think it's quite interesting to see how it's going to evolve with more people being vaccinated, because it might be a hope for everyone else that yes, we can live with it. We can live normally. The only risk, I guess, is then if it's still circulating and you have mutation. And if you have mutation, then you have new problems, as we're seeing in some places. But other than that, it's been quite a journey here, as anywhere else. But we are very lucky, very lucky. And then we're covering as well many countries in Africa, which is the complete opposite. And I can touch base a bit later. But if you look at South Africa, being hit now by the 3rd wave, they had to go back into level 4. Back into curfew, restaurants closed. There are up to 65,000 people who died already in South Africa, and they're seeing up to 25,000 cases a day, which is a lot for South Africa. So we are in our area is pretty much unbalanced with complete, and then they have done I think 3% vaccination in South Africa only. So it's the complete opposite, and we can see the differences. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sebastian. It's been fascinating actually watching and sort of I've been looking at how the Emirates has been dealing with this, and it's been very interesting. I mean, I remember at the beginning, like every night, the whole city was desanitized, wasn't it? It was.
Yeah, true. With drones.
Yeah. So, just to say to everybody who's listening, again, thank you so much for being here. If you've got a question or a comment, please pop it into the chat box. And remember the Zoom default on the chat box is that you're only talking to the panelists. So if you just click on the thing and go to panelists and attendees, everyone can see the comments and questions that you have. Anna, can we talk about the impact of mobility? And I mean, you're in Australia, but you're talking about the wider region as well. So what is happening? Because obviously when we've spoken in the past, I mean, with Australia's zero COVID policy, not a lot of people coming in, right? There was a special, but has that now been nixed?
Yeah, so I saw also on the chat that somebody's mentioned Indonesia, so I can come to that in a second.
Right.
So we were most definitely going in the right direction with skilled migrants being granted visas to get into the country to fill this incredible skills gap. The unemployment rate is below what it was pre-COVID now. There's definitely a war for talent happening. So we were starting to see genuinely quite a number of people getting into the country, which was fantastic. And even just early last week, they added another 22 occupations, a total list of 41, which they consider to be kind of essential to Australia's recovery. Things like accountants and engineers and anyone in medical and technology and things like that. So if you met those, if you had that occupation and met those criteria, plus got a travel exemption to enter the country, then you were coming in. And then for all intents and purposes, there was no COVID while we were here, so everybody was able to settle quite quickly and easily, and we did accompanied inspections, and everything was back to normal. But as we said before, because this Delta variant and is escaping from this hotel quarantine system and getting out into the community, and the community at large has a very low tolerance for living with COVID. No one has any desire to live with COVID at the moment in Australia. So just last Friday, they've halved the number of passengers. So I kid you not, London to Sydney single fare, $38,500. So there's not a lot of people that are going to be paying that kind of money for the flights. And I feel for the airlines too, right? They're commercial operations. They've got long haul flights and they've got so few passengers on them. So it's got to be worth their while too. So I can completely understand why that is occurring. So that obviously is not good for mobility, but at the same time, Australia is a very desirable place to live. It's stable, it's wealthy, it's well regulated. So I think there's a desire, and it's very much an untapped market for many industries. So I think it's just a waiting game. It's just going to be a little bit more of a bumpy ride than we had thought. They're currently saying mid next year is when they hope to have an open border, and I guess by that stage they're talking tourists and students, international students. So we're hopeful that maybe the skilled migrants will start to come in earlier if there's enough lobbying from business that it's a genuine requirement. Yeah,
it's such an important balance between obviously keeping COVID free, but also the economic impact of the fact that, like you say, there is now zero unemployment, and therefore the economy has to get going again, and there just aren't the people. So yeah.
And this is a country entirely built on migration. And so having a net outflow of migrants is incredibly damaging for the economy. So it's a very fine balancing act between the economy and the population and what we want and our freedoms and all that sort of stuff at the moment. Yeah.
In the other areas in which you're working, what's going on?
Well, it's not amazing, and unfortunately, and last year when COVID first hit, many of the Pacific nations and Southern Asian nations like Malaysia and Indonesia, but also less developed countries, maybe such as Papua New Guinea, Fiji, New Caledonia, they all shut their borders very quickly, and so they really didn't have any COVID last year. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, they are now going through some quite serious situations. And what's really scary in those locations is there is no advanced healthcare system. There's no government safety nets to help people. And what's really sad is that these are countries that rely quite significantly on tourism from principally Australia, New Zealand, and we're not traveling there. So the tourism has been, devastatingly hit. I mean, for example, in Fiji, they're going through it at the moment. They're getting about, I don't know, what was it, about 800 cases a day, but they've only got a population of 900,000. So that's quite a lot. But they have done very well in their vaccine rollout. And Australia is sending doses to its neighbouring countries. So they're sending, I think, what did they say, 2.5 million doses they're sending to Indonesia. And I think it was $12 million worth of oxygen, to help, because Indonesia is really, hopefully it doesn't get as bad as what happened in India, but they are in the real crux at the moment of escalating cases. I think it's up to about 34,000 a day. And they're in a very tight lockdown, but as I'm sure is the case with India, in that kind of society when incomes are not necessarily guaranteed, people have to go out to get the money to go and bring it home. So you try and tell those people to do a lockdown, and it's really, really hard.
There's a traffic jam outside every day now.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's people are back to work, people are back on the road. So I think people who don't have the money, need to get back to work. People who have been locked in for a long time, what I call revenge traveling. So that's happening. People are just taking their cars and just driving into the mountains, or driving, just to get out with their kids or their dogs and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of mobility happening right now, which is like a kind of a spin-off because of the regression, or because of the the lockdowns and being kind of suppressed inside your houses, and then you want to get out, you want to get back to work, you want to get back to, you want to go to a hill station and just breathe fresh air without worrying about who's standing next to you, where there's nobody else around you, which is actually a good point, Anna, which you said, because which is what is leading to a huge increase in in domestic relocation, which is the side of mobility, which is what we're all geared up for, is to moving young millennials from one city to the other, because they're ready to take up a job in another city, looking for a change, and companies and organizations are taking advantage of that. So they're recruiting a lot locally and moving the talent from one city to the other. And I can see that globally when we talk to RMCs, we talk to other clients. I think that's a question they have, that, hey, do you have any experience in domestic mobility? And I said, well, come on in. And that's what we've been busy with, trying to use a balance of our technology and the human touch to kind of, because everybody needs that human touch right now, and be able to kind of tell them, listen, you're sitting in Bangalore, but you want to go to Pune because you want a job there, because you feel that it's less crowded, the air is more fresh, and you'd like to take that assignment. So come on in, we'll take you, we'll help you in your mobility experience. So I think the spin-off, because of this, has been a great increase in domestic mobility, one. And I think the other thing, which maybe Dima touched on earlier, is there's a lot of people ready to get out, but go on short stays. So you have suddenly a big demand for short-term temporary accommodation for 3 months, 2 months, so on. People want to do that, and these are assignments they would never take. They might not have opted for before, but today people are ready to take that assignment. Said, okay, it's a 3-month assignment. I'm happy to do that. So there is an increase in short-term accommodation or demand. There is an increase in managing moves for domestic relocation, which is on the rise. So I think, I'm connecting the dots to the way the mobility industry is headed, is to the fact that in spite of all the pros and cons of what's not happening right or whatever, there are opportunities, and I think that's what we're trying to do here, is adapt ourselves, adapt our people, our talent, what we have, and other technology, what we have, whatever else quotient is required in that, to be able to cater to this changing demand, because we see that there's an opportunity, whether it's in temporary accommodation or domestic mobility, or a lot of companies are recruiting, instead of recruiting maybe we have, I'm proud to say that we have Indians everywhere across the globe. Pepsi is headed by an Indian, so is Google headed by an Indian, and so on and so forth. Many such organizations. A lot of people in the U.S. White House right now, including the vice president, is of Indian origin. Anyway, so people are taking cues of that. We can see a lot of Indians coming back from different countries at high posts, because it's easier for them to come back, less visa issues. They have the same budgets, they have the same everything, because they were holding high positions there. So I think that is a changing trend which is coming in. So my take on that is that in spite of everything, there is an opportunity. There are opportunities in the mobility industry. Mobility is happening, maybe in different shapes and sizes, and I'm sure that's common to the other countries, to the other panelists, who are here right now.
And we'll move on in a second. But Roman, I just wanted to ask you, Annie, you were saying that the Australian government is saying middle of next year things in terms of travel, but hopefully skilled visas will come in before that. Roman, are you hearing anything about that from the government in India? And also, how is that influenced by the state-to-state governments?
So that's a good one. So we at the center, for everyone to know, has a government which is holding the majority in the House. One. Two, they at the state level, so every state government can be from a different, can be ruled by a different party, but a lot of states in India are ruled by the current government, which is holding the central government power of the central government. So which kind of streamlines a lot of execution of law. So it does happen, you're right, that if they have introduced that we need to introduce masks, for example, to be be an important, to be compulsory in public places, for example. So it's not necessary that the state in which that government is not, they would also want to execute that in the same manner. But while I say that, overall, nobody wants to live with COVID, as you said correctly, Anna. People want to get rid of it. People realize that, so I think the macro focus of India is to kind of ensure that vaccinations happen, and all the state policies and the government policies are aimed at that. There is a lot of pushback from a lot of rural areas. Remember, 70% of our population or more actually lives in tier 2 or tier 3 cities or in villages, or in the agricultural side of the field, where they are pushing back and saying that, this is not good for us, we don't want it. So there is a tough road ahead for us to educate them to make sure that they do speed up the vaccination. Because when I say 300 million people, as Sebastian said correctly, that's 3% of the population. So we still have 97% to vaccinate.
Yeah, the figures are so astounding. Dima, on that point, again, can I come to you and talk about, what's the impact right now? I mean, you alluded to the fact, and when we've spoken before, that domestic is really strong in China. What's going on with international?
Yeah, I mean, we've looking sort of at the main markets that we're handling, which is mainland China, Hong Kong, Singapore. We actually had an uptake on business, even international business, already since last September. Pretty much, I mean, led predominantly by China, who started to allowing business travelers back in with an exemption letter. We've seen numbers creep up again in terms of order volume. And if you look at those numbers, first quarter and the second quarter this year, we're actually very close to the numbers that we had in 2019, again, from a pure order volume perspective. Now, two things that are very different this year, and that may sort of have an impact or maybe the same impact in other markets. And for one, we seem to be receiving initiations a lot earlier than normal, which for years we've been begging the RMCs and the corporates to send us the initiations as early as possible. And this year they're doing it, but without actually being able to confirm an actual arrival date. So from that perspective, we're getting the orders through the door, but then we have a very hard time actually predicting when the arrivals will take place and then when we will be providing our services. So the volume is there, but in terms of executing it and billing for it, which is obviously key for everybody, that is still up in the air. So we can't still yet predict the revenue for sort of the key markets, because we got to see when we actually will be able to press the go button on this. So that is certainly up in terms of the value. The volume is okay. The value is slightly lower than it used to be. So we have the feeling that a lot of the clients are hesitant about the services that they're ordering and seem to be going in with an attitude of, let's go first with a few basic, like it's not straight away the 5-day program, the 7-day program. It's more of a, this sunny is coming, let's reserve for 2 days and let's see what's happening. So that puts a little bit of uncertainty into the mix. And quite frankly, that uncertainty goes through the entire life cycle of a file. And it's been really frustrating to see, in a sense, that the workload behind every order is so significant at present. So the work that the team has to do in order to plan for the arrival, to take in mind continuously changing quarantine requirements, testing requirements, all of that has to be, to a degree, coordinated through the file manager. The work is really, well, not through the roof, but it is really significant. And I think that's one of the challenges that the industry will have, is that we aren't currently obviously able to put up prices, right? But the work that we put in behind each file is so significantly larger than it used to pre-COVID. And obviously for a short-term phase, that is something that you can do, but on a long-term basis, if this is the new normal, that we will have to put as much into a work file, then we will come to a point where simply rates will have to be addressed. I mean, it's otherwise a very difficult circumstance. At least that is sort of for some of the works that we're seeing into our key sort of APAC situations. Now, a couple of other things that we've seen, we had a couple of new opportunities to provide new services, for example, quarantine support, which is sort of while the transferees are in quarantine, to have a contact person that helps with coordinating of deliveries, communication with the hotels, or setting up payment services. So we've been doing that quite a lot. Of the obvious requests for virtual services always comes up at the beginning. But what was interesting, and I'm very curious to hear from the others on the panel, we had a lot of requests for pricing for a virtual service and writing a service description. But then we had actually very little uptake on executing on it. Okay, that may be because we were able to deliver a lot of services live and in person. But I wonder whether for other markets that's the same case, whether they've actually been delivering virtual services a lot, and whether that is really such a big thing going forward in the future, and whether that will become sort of a staple of our industry, that we are delivering X amount of services through virtual platforms. So yeah, there's been some really interesting trends for the international arrivals into our markets, but then, as you said, domestically, China in particular, I mean, it is a big country. There's a lot of moves within the country, and there are hardly any restrictions. So people are allowed to move relatively freely within the country. And obviously also with that, domestic holidays and domestic travel for leisure is up as well.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, from the point of view of that pricing thing, I mean, that's a huge debate across the industry right now, because the like say the amount of work that's going on is ever increasing. We're all talking about duty of care. We're all looking at how the amalgamation of the virtual services can increase duty of care, but they're also increasing the, I mean, it's like there is a perception that because the service is virtual, it doesn't take as much work, but it actually takes twice as much, right?
Yeah.
Fascinating for you, because again, I know that across your network, you've been involved in that same debate. So what's going on across where you're working? Oh, Sebastian, sorry, you're on mute. Hello.
Sorry, I didn't want any noise. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
yeah, but you know, after 2 years of remote calls and on, we should be used to it. Look, it's very similar to what Dima was saying. We've seen the difference is that the impact has been limited because the borders have been open. So the only impact we had was mostly in Abu Dhabi, where anyone arriving has to go through a 10-day quarantine with an electronic bracelet. That's quite intense, yeah. So you're being fitted on day 1, then you have to do a PCR test on day 6, day 8, and on day 10 they remove your electronic bracelet. So it's quite interesting. Dubai took the opposite approach, where you're free to come. There's no quarantine as long as you have a PCR test. That helped us a lot, because as soon as the lockdown was over last year, we're able to deliver services normally. So we've seen a huge demand. Like Dima was saying, we are pretty much at the number of 2019, which is quite interesting, because we didn't anticipate that. We are seeing a lot of group move, but let's keep in mind we have a different market once again, with 85% of the population being expatriates. So a lot of them left last year, were not able to come back, were stuck back home, were scared to travel, where we got scared of the situation and said, you know what, it's time for me to go back close to my family because I didn't like that experience. They decided to move back, so now they have to be replaced. And we're seeing major moves. We're seeing a large move in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Dubai. So yeah, very, very busy. In terms of services, I agree with Dima. I mean, we're back to normal services. I mean, we had a lot of requests for remote services. We've seen them in place when they were forced by the situation, being a lockdown, being a curfew, being a quarantine. But as soon as this was over, we are seeing more and more normal traditional services, maybe a bit shorter, like Dima was saying, but other than that, it's pretty much back to normal. South Africa, which is a second hub, is seeing the same thing. We are lucky enough, despite the third wave happening in South Africa right now, the borders are open. And I think that's a key element for all of us. As soon as the borders open and we can assist clients on the field, then we can deliver services. So it's been quite interesting as well to see that at one point we had to do a lot of remote assistance. We had to do a lot of remote departures for people who were stuck outside the country. But that's pretty much back to normal in all the places we do operate as of today. The one challenge we're seeing across the border, and I'm sure I'm hearing it's global, is the rental market. And rental market is making things more difficult, more challenging, because there is no supply. And even though in a place like Dubai, where we have new properties, being handed over every month, we are in a situation where we cannot find villa, especially villa. I think a lot of people wanted to move out of apartments when the lockdown, working from home. They decided to go ahead and rent a villa. And last year, at the peak of COVID, the market went down. People took the opportunity to move around to something cheaper or something bigger for the same price, and then the market picked up. And today we are struggling to find good properties, and it's quite challenging because I think we all know it around this table, and I'm hearing it from over the SPs around the world, but the assignees don't know it yet. So the assignee is thinking, hey, I'm going into a place where there's a crisis. I'm going to get a good deal. I'm going to find what I want. So setting the expectations, working with RMCs and HR is very important because they don't know what they're getting into. And they're shocked when they see that, hold on, I thought it was a global crisis going on. How come the rental market is being so challenging? And it is a reality. And I don't know about you guys around this table, but it's been quite challenging. And this summer is going to be very challenging because traditionally this is the time of the year in this part of the atmosphere where people are moving around, and we're going to see a lot of people arriving. We have a lot of people on the books arriving this summer, and that's going to make the challenge even more difficult. And the last thing I think was in line with what Dima was saying. Yeah, indeed, we have a lot in our books. I think it's helping us to be back at where we're in 2019. We're seeing delays in executing as well, but I think for me, it was a backlog of what didn't happen in 2020 and what was pushed. And now we're clearing that backlog. So it keeps us busy, and we are lucky enough to be able to deliver services. But yeah, the rental market is definitely a challenge.
I mean, that is so interesting because, again, talking with colleagues across the world, you find these weird anomalies. Like, for example, in the UK, everybody wanted to move out of the cities, so the purchase market in the rural areas have, the prices have gone up by 40%. Whereas a city like Amsterdam, I was talking to a colleague there, where something like 70% of rentals were in the Airbnb space. And suddenly they're no longer in that space anymore because there are no tourists, and so therefore, prices have gone down. But clearly, that is not the case in Dubai. I'm not say about the demand for villas. So,
and we're going to have, sorry, one more thing. We're going to have something interesting as well happening in Dubai is that we have the World Expo coming in October. So that's going to increase demand, especially in temporary accommodation. So they were expecting prior to COVID, 25 million visitors. We don't know what's going to happen because COVID is still around. So it was moved back from 2020 to 2021. The name remained Expo 2020, but we are seeing already increases of up to 80% in temporary accommodation. That will have an impact as well on the moves going forward.
It really will. It really, really will. We're coming really close to time. If anybody's got a question or a comment they'd like to make, please just pop it into the chat box. One thing that came out of the Europe, North America and Central America briefing that we did last week was costs of shipping. Are you seeing any impact on that? Anna, can I start with you? I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of shipping right now.
You can start with me, and yes. So I think everybody's probably aware that there's a worldwide shortage of containers, and containers are all in the wrong locations that they're supposed to be in. So household goods companies are really struggling to obtain them and get them delivered. And I was talking to someone just this week actually, and he was like 4 times they've had containers delivered to their place, and they've had like stinking of chemicals or littered with holes in them, and they've, how can you possibly put someone's household goods in that? So they've had to send them back. Obviously with Australia's location, we can ship direct to US or to Europe, but invariably it often goes through Singapore, and then it can sit in Singapore for 3 weeks whilst it waits to get on another ship. So yeah, there's been a complete blowout of cost. I think everybody's aware of that. The price per container is ridiculously high, and it's not going anywhere. And the same for air freight. I think with the reduction in flights, I think airlines have known that they can recover quite a lot of cost that they've lost through passenger flights in the freight side of things. So that's also pretty expensive. And I just thought I'd add on the virtual point that Dima was making. I think that really the only uptake in virtual home searches and the like that we've had is with people who are stuck in 14 days quarantine in a hotel. They've relocated during a global pandemic. They do not want to go into another temporary accommodation. They just want to find a home and get some stability and get settled. And so they want somebody to go out and do a FaceTime with them. But obviously, if they had the choice, or then there are other people who actually definitely want to eyeball a property community themselves before they take it up. So I'm also not necessarily convinced that the virtual side of things is here to stay. I don't think so. But also, interestingly, we've had masses of returning Australians, and we've actually been giving them destination services, which is really interesting because they went as a 24-year-old bachelor, and they're coming back with, 2 kids and a wife, and they don't know anything about the schooling system. They don't know where to live. They don't know, so it's been quite interesting helping the returning Australians as well.
Yeah, that's
sorry, I digressed from the shipping.
This is the whole thing about this, isn't it? That there are so many weird anomalies that are sort of going on right now. I mean, again, Dima, Sebastian, Roman, have you got anything to add to that?
I think the freight industry in India definitely grew. I think because of a lot of departure services, though there were challenges, as you said correctly, Anna, that the containers were short of supply and the cost went up. But I think anybody who was in the moving and packing or the household good business saw definitely growth in business from that factor. Of course, the challenges of supply, challenges of space did exist, but as Anna said correctly, a lot of airlines, a lot of companies, shipping companies, were making up for the passenger side by increasing their availability of their capacity for freight. So I think that the freight industry in India definitely had a good run in the last 1 year.
Interesting. Sebastian, anything, because you were saying it hasn't impacted so much on the Middle East.
No, I mean, the pricing, yes, definitely. I mean, we are seeing our clients sending us that pricing, and even though we're not involved in the shipment, we can see the pricing has increased, but no delays yet. So I think it's a good thing, and right now we don't see any impact on our markets, both in Africa and Middle East yet, or significant impact. Might be coming with the increase of volume over the summer. Let's see.
I just wonder if there'll be an impact on Expo. All those people trying to get their kind of palaces built for the Expo. There's going to be a lot of containers. Dima, anything across your networks? I would imagine it's pretty huge.
Yeah, no, just exactly adding on to what was already said. It's gotten a lot more expensive. It gotten a lot harder to book, and timings are very hard to predict. And airlines have made up for that, and not just with the freight, but also obviously with the normal commercial travel. Apologies. Somebody else may have to take over for that.
Listen, we're at time. Thank you so much, Anna, Dima, Sebastian, Roman, for being part of this. We're going to keep these briefings going, so if you'd like to take part, please just drop me an email. We've got a couple more set up for, we're all going into the summer now, so whatever, well, not you, Anna, sorry, you're going into winter. For a lot of us. So we're going to pick up again in September. We very much hope that we will be running a live event in September in London. Who knows? But at the moment, we're still planning that for the best, although I will let you know that one of the hotels that we were planning to use has actually extended its quarantine contract, so we'll be moving somewhere else.
Or maybe you can look at Dubai as an option. That's open.
Same time as the Expo, because there'll be nowhere to stay. But no, listen, great to see you all. Thank you so much for taking part. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today. And like I say, if you're watching this on demand, just drop a note in the box and put a like on the thing and subscribe to our channel. But thank you so much, everybody. It's been great to hear from you. Thank you for updating us with what's going on. And keep in touch and stay safe. And great to see you all. See you soon.
Thank you so much, Dom.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dom. Thanks as always.